580-5436. 580-KIDEA. This issue involving gun-free zones. That is one topic where, California has some of the toughest restrictive laws in the country. And yet you have this terrible shooting, right? So if laws prevent people from hurting others, if laws prevent people from using guns to commit crimes, don't we need more laws and gun-free zones and everything else? Right? Isn't that what it's coming to? That's really the point. At 580-5436. 580-KIDO. That's the point that you're not hearing from Jerry Nadler. You're not hearing from everyone else. What you are hearing from them is the call for impeachment.
There will be a deadline because we will either get the answers that we need or the president's obstruction will be so complete that that itself becomes the grounds for his impeachment.
They just can't give it up. Now, you've heard the comments of the president and everybody else, right?
The jury that I'm most worried about, not the Senate, because I think that's a preordained conclusion, is the American people. Can we make the case to the American people? And I want to make sure that that's true before.
Well, they can't make the case. Let's go to Kurt in Boise with Kevin Miller, KIDO Talk Radio. Kurt, good morning.
Good morning, Kevin. Yeah, I'd like to comment just about the gun-free zones. I mean, that just proves again that they don't work. It doesn't matter what you try to do. The guy cut through the fencing, and he just went wild. I mean, I don't understand it. It's so funny that they have a gun-free zones in California and other states. They have them here, the police department, the library, anywhere. Anything could happen at any time anymore. It's just ridiculous. And I just totally against gun-free zones, and I think every citizen, well, we do have the right to carry a gun, but I think every citizen should be put in the military to help not only learn how to fire a weapon, but also how to protect our country and look out after it, like they do in Israel. But I know that's going way too far right. But
well, we're all about going way too far right, Kurt. God bless, and thank you for the call.
You too.
All right. Tom, Tim, Bill, Steve, and Willie, you're next. But first, the great champion of liberty, our own Lars Larson, joining us. Catch him tonight at 6 on KIDO Talk Radio. Lars, welcome to Monday.
Kevin, I'm sorry I was late running back down the hall, but I got to tell you, your previous caller is right. But when he says that's going too far right, he's wrong about that. I carry a gun every day. Unless I'm getting on an airplane or going to a federal building where I'm not allowed, I carry a gun. And I want to tell you something. I've got a friend, John Lott, who's written many books. He's an economist, but he writes books about guns and about the bias against guns. He points out that in the most recent, say, 30 years, 98% of mass shootings have happened in gun-free zones. Now, if you had that kind of statistic on anything else, if you said, more people who live in Denver, Colorado get cancer because there's less atmosphere, they're a mile up, you'd say, well, that's an important thing to identify, that we have more of a problem somewhere where we can identify why the problem is there. If you tell people 98% of mass shootings happen in gun-free zones, you'd say, well, then the answer is to get rid of gun-free zones. And California is worse because I was in Gilroy just literally 6 or 8 months ago. Tina and I drove down, and we were, doing a little antique shopping and this and that and the other thing, and went down by Monterey, and we went through Gilroy. We've been through Gilroy before. It's a great little town. So they're having this garlic festival for which they're famous. And what do they do in the garlic festival? They make sure that the garlic festival is 100% gun-free. Now, what does that tell a bad guy? The man's now been identified, and we don't know much more about him at this point, but we have his name. But what does he know about the place? He knows that he can walk in there with a gun. And we know that he knew it was a gun-free zone because he went through the fence by cutting through the fence instead of going through the front gate, because he knew he wouldn't get through the front gate. They were using metal detectors. So they had created a 100% victim zone for this bad guy. And then you take California in general, which has some of the toughest gun laws in America. I say the most ridiculous tough gun laws because they actually put law-abiding citizens at risk. But then focus down to Santa Clara County. This is where the attack happened. This is where Gilroy is. In the state, the county has 1.5 million adults in that county, and 113 of them have a concealed handgun permit. Now, Boise would make them look foolish by comparison, because that means that 0.007% of adults, one permit issued for every 14,000 people in that county. So you already have a county where very few people could have stopped this guy when he began shooting. Now, the police stopped him within a minute. But within a minute, he'd already murdered, as I understand, there are 3 people now identified as dead and more than a dozen people who've been wounded or injured, and there's a difference. But that 1 minute is critical. And with all due respect to the police, I tell my police friends, when seconds count, the police are only minutes away. The police got on this guy and killed him within 1 minute. But that 1 minute let him murder 3 people and wound more than a dozen. So you have to change this. And by the way, the estimate for what it costs to get a permit, you have to do a psychological screening. You have to do the initial processing. You have to pay for a permit. You have to pay for 16 hours of training. Before you even buy the gun, before you even buy the bullets, before you even think about carrying it, you're about $500 worth of government requirements before you can think about having a concealed carry permit in Santa Clara County, California, or in most of California. The requirements are statewide. So you've made it very difficult for law-abiding citizens to be armed. That means it's very easy for the bad guys to be armed. This guy was a bad guy. He was a murderous son of a gun, and he murdered people, and he knew he could get away with it because he knew that the police would take at least a minute to get to him, and in that minute, he killed 3 people. So I'd love to talk to the naysayer on the show today, Kevin, who tells me why it makes sense to disarm the law-abiding while allowing the law-breaking people to continue to have arms.
Our great friend Lars Larson joining us, KIDO Talk Radio, 107.5 FM, 580 AM. Catch him tonight at 6. Lars, the other big news of the day, obviously, the president, the tweet storm, Congressman Cummings, and, we'll just let you take it from there.
I mean, look, Baltimore's a mess. A former mayor of Baltimore is on tapes, this is from a couple of years ago, saying as she walked through the city, she could smell the stench of dead rats. Bernie Sanders, you don't get much more liberal than the commie from Vermont. He called Baltimore like a third world country. But apparently it's okay for Democrats and even office holders from Baltimore or national presidential candidates like Sanders to criticize Baltimore. But if Donald Trump criticizes Baltimore, all of a sudden it's racist bigotry. How do you figure?
An incredible double standard, and just hearing the shows and the condemnation and Christian fascist and all these terms coming up.
Christian fascist. What the heck is that?
Donnie Deutsch on MSNBC Saturday night. It's crazy.
Well, it is. But what we should recognize is that Elijah Cummings can make all kinds of noise about how much he hates Donald Trump and how much he wants to help people from other countries illegally come into our country. How about he does something for the district that he has actually served for decades? And is it incorrect to criticize somebody who has a responsibility to his constituents and who has apparently fallen down in that responsibility? Is that racist? I mean, does it mean that if you are a black member of Congress, you cannot be criticized because any criticism of a member of Congress who has black skin is not legitimate criticism? It is racial bigotry aimed at the man because he has black skin. I think Donald Trump has identified there is a problem there. There are representatives in Congress. And by the way, back when the Freddie Gray shooting or the Freddie Gray death happened, remember he was in custody. He was in the back of a paddy wagon. And, of course, all the police were appropriately exonerated. A majority of them were people of color. I went and did a little research on Baltimore, and the numbers were accurate at the time. I think they're probably still accurate today. A majority of its legislature is made up of people of color. A majority of the Baltimore City Council is made up of people of color. A majority of the the county, I can't remember the county, but the county that Baltimore is in is made up of people of color. A majority of the upper echelons of the police department is people of color. So how can you say that Baltimore is suffering because of racism or bigotry when the state is run by people of color? The city, the county are run by people of color. The police department is run, and I believe, if I remember the number right, because this was a couple of years ago when the Freddie Gray death happened, a majority of the police officers in the police department are people of color. So what racist bigotry is occurring where people of color run the show, and then people of color who live in the city say we are the victims of racist bigotry by people of color? Does that make sense to anybody?
No. Lars Larson joining us. Catch him tonight or anytime, larslarson.com. It is fascinating to see how that, and going back to the former mayor of Baltimore, now I believe she's an ABC News and or a CNN contributor, how she condemned the police officers who were later acquitted of the Freddie Gray death. Baltimore.
Did she ever apologize for that? Because I would, even if you legitimately thought, I mean, there have been times I've legitimately criticized people, and I thought the criticism was legitimate at the time. But if it turns out I'm wrong, the very least you owe those people, whoever you've criticized, no matter what color they are, is an apology if you are wrong. Did she ever apologize for doing that?
No, not that I know of.
And I'll tell you something else you should be aware of, and I may get into this on the national show tonight. We've talked about it before, but George Soros, who's a very liberal multi-billionaire, has decided to make it his cause. He can't seem to get the changes in the law he wants, so he's essentially buying district attorneys. And by that I mean he comes in, he takes people who in many cases are thoroughly unqualified. There was one of them that ran here in Oregon who was not a person of color, he was a white guy. And he was a thoroughly incompetent assistant district attorney who'd had all kinds of down checks for not even doing his job as an ADA. We have DAs here. I think you have prosecutors in Idaho, right? They call them prosecutors or DAs?
Prosecutors.
Yeah, prosecutors. But he's thoroughly unqualified. He runs. He gets hundreds of thousands of dollars from a George Soros organization to run against the existing DA. And you wonder, well, why would you do that? If you can't get the laws changed, you change the law enforcers, which is the same as changing the law, because the person who makes that judgment call, whether it's Ada County or any other county in Idaho, if you can say, well, we can't get Boise, the legislature, to change the law, but if the guy or gal enforcing the law is willing to not enforce the law that is on the books, there's not much you can do about it. And let me give you a perfect example of it. Kim Foxx was a George Soros product in Cook County, Illinois. And who was it that decided that Jussie Smollett should not be prosecuted for the 16 counts of staging a racist hoax hate crime and getting away with it? Who decided to dismiss all the charges, no prejudice whatsoever? Kim Foxx, bought and paid for by George Soros. So if you want to see what will happen to American counties where Soros buys the DA, they will stop enforcing laws that are very important to enforce, and violent crime will go up. I can draw you a picture in crayon that just says, if you stop enforcing the laws against violent criminals, you will get more violent crime. And American communities forget this. A lot of times they'll pass a tough on crime law. You'll have 10 or 15 or 20 years of enforcement of that law. A good example was the crackdown by Bill Clinton in the 90s on drug crimes because they were laying waste to big American communities. And then after 20 years, people say, well, why do we have all these tough laws? It doesn't seem to be a problem. And they're not understanding. You've had those laws enforced for 20 years, and the result was a much lower crime rate. And it's like they walk around saying, well, gosh, why do we need these laws? Things don't seem to be that bad. Well, the thing that keeps them not that bad is the existence and the enforcement of those laws. If you get new DAs or prosecutors into communities and they stop enforcing the law, you aren't necessarily going to see the result next week or next month or even next year. But 5 years from now, you say, why is violent crime going up in our community? It's because George Soros is out buying district attorneys and prosecutors all over America. He's done it in Texas. He's done it in Florida. He did it in Cook County, Illinois. Tried to do it, and thankfully the voters were wise to it because we got on the air and we wised them up to it and said, this guy is trying to Soros is trying to buy this guy's way into the DA's office, where he will then not prosecute or prosecute at a much lower level violent criminals, and you will be the victims. It'll be members of your family that get raped or assaulted or even murdered because this guy has decided to do this. And it is an end around in the legislature, because if you go to the legislature and you can't get them to drop the penalties, then the way to drop the penalties is just have the prosecutor drop them. He prosecutes. He'll say, well, I prosecuted that person, but at a much lower level. Well, the criminals get the message. It's like with your kids. You say to your kids, hey, you're gone past curfew last night. Well, okay, what are you going to do to me, Mom, Dad? Are you going to ground me for a week or a month? No, I'm going to take 50 cents off your allowance this week. The kid says, okay, so I can go out and break the rules, and the penalty is very small. Good. I'm going to keep on breaking the rules.
Lars Larson tonight at 6. We always appreciate you. LarsLarson.com, Facebook, Twitter. Thank you for making time for us. We appreciate the sprint.
It's always my pleasure. Take care, Kevin.
Thank you, Lars. Let's get to your phone calls. Tom in Nampa with Kevin Miller on KIDO Talk Radio. Good morning, Tom. Thanks for your patience.
Good morning. Question, if these gun-free zones work, why don't we just put up a sign around the Capitol building in D.C., gun-free zone, and we can shut down the Capitol Police Department, which is basically an armed security force that protects the Capitol building, the senators and the congressmen and their staffs therein. If all we need is a sign, I think that's a lot cheaper than all these armed officers. We could save a lot of money.
I agree. I mean, obviously, gun-free zones work. Look what happened in California.
Exactamente. And if having guns on the street is a bad thing, why is it off-duty officers carry their sidearms? Shouldn't they, at the end of watch, lock them up at the precinct? And, they can just rely on 911 like the rest of us.
Right.
I think every department whose chief has come out and said, you don't need a gun, should have, let's get these guns off the street. We know these officers. We know we can lock them up. We can keep them off the street at the end. Or we can save even more money by just having officers trade in their guns to the oncoming watch. I think we can save a lot of money this way. By the way, why do chief of police and the police hierarchy, why are they armed at all? They're not kicking down doors. They're not serving felony warrants. They haven't arrested anybody in years. They're administrators. They're paper shufflers. Why do they have sidearms? Let's disarm the police chiefs. Let's see how well that goes over.
Tom, thank you for the call and listening to KIDO Talk Radio.
Okay. Bye-bye.
Bye-bye. More next. Kevin Miller, KIDO Talk Radio. John in Middleton, good morning. You're on KIDO Talk Radio.
Hey, good morning, Kevin. I used to live outside of Baltimore like 20 years ago, and it was incredibly dangerous back then. I mean, I just regretted ever having to go into there. And I can't even imagine how bad it is now, 20 more years of being run by Democrats. So I think Trump, he's not racist for pointing out every Democrat-controlled city is just an S-hole. It's just undeniable. So I support the president in pointing that out, and he wasn't racist or making it racial at all. But it just so happens that these major cities are run by Democrats, and they all are pretty much disaster areas and no-go zones. We saw what happened on video with those two tourists, those white people who just got smashed out in front of that nice hotel. I mean, that says it all right there. I mean, you just watch that video and you'll see why you don't go to these areas and why, if you do, you got to, even a 15-round magazine isn't enough because they're gangs of thugs. You get hit once in the head, you fall in that concrete. Can you imagine me with your wife and children and just that happening to you out of nowhere? I mean, that's how these people roll, man. It's crazy. So, support the president in that. And last week you had the mayor of Nampa on, and she sounded like a really nice lady, but Idaho is essentially a sanctuary state for people who are in this country illegally, and Nampa would be the capital of that. And so I'm kind of curious to know what she's doing to get rid of people who are here illegally, because right now well known that you can come to this state. Nampa is a hotbed for it. You can work. You get your government goodie cards filled up with money. Never runs out. You see them in the Wincos with the MS-13 all across the face, and their carts overflowing with food. So she's creating an environment where incentivizing those sorts of people to move here, live here, rewarding them, and not doing anything to stop businesses from supporting them as well. So I'm kind of curious, like what she was saying, the two biggest things for her were safety and transportation. I'm kind of curious what specifically she's doing to keep us safe. And, you know, these people who are here illegally, they're here illegally. They don't respect our laws to begin with. So it kind of just didn't make sense to me. What were your thoughts on that?
Well, you know, there's not much these mayors can do. You see some mayors in bigger states, John, talk about, you know, sanctuary cities. I know Nampa isn't one of them. You have people in Canyon County very concerned about it. We don't know how many people are in the Ada County Jail or the Canyon County Jail that are here illegally. And then I think it's more of a business problem where, you know, all you have to do to solve the problem of illegal immigration, illegal workers, is E-Verify. Your E-Verify didn't come through. We can't hire you. And then all of a sudden you start taxing, which actually in the country of Mexico, they make more money from people sending money back home than the oil industry. You tax that at 50% clip, and all of a sudden they're paying for the wall, which was one of the president's plans. But whether it's a mayor, whether it's a governor, whether it's a county commissioner, this is a situation that needs to be handled. So I don't know if that answered your question, but, you know, back to the mayor of Nampa, I think that's outside of her jurisdiction. You know, I'm, you know, you don't have any mayor saying in Idaho we're a sanctuary city. That's for sure.
They don't say it, but by them allowing businesses to hire them, I feel like they're just kind of washing their hands and turning a blind eye to it instead of being out in front of the issue and saying, hey, we got a real problem here. We need to address it. You know, if she just says, oh, that's ICE's responsibility, you know, I don't know. I mean, it's her community. She's the one in charge of kind of setting the tone.
Well, let me hit you with this one. Heck, the president can't even have ICE arrest people with raids. I mean, they can run into a house and you knock on the door. They go, we're not letting you in, ICE, even though we're here illegally.
So shouldn't it be a local issue then? I mean, in my opinion.
My man.
Come on.
Oh.
So, hey, real quick, can I finish this? I was trying to make a point about bikes. I know it sounds really petty, but you have a couple seconds or you got to run. It's totally fine if you got to run.
We're all about being petty here in the morning, so please go ahead, John.
Okay. So, you know, we have a major transportation issue here, and what got me started on this was I almost hit a cyclist last week, all right? And
sure.
We're not talking a bike lane here. We're talking these little, like, Amity, like one lane going this way, the other lane going that way, and like 6 inches of shoulder. And these guys on these bikes are just hogging up the road. I'm doing 50, he's doing maybe 10, like old man Bernie Sanders on a bike, 10 speed, and I almost hit the guy. I don't want to hit him, but it shows like a complete, utter disregard for their own lives and safety and for the safety of us. And roads, for these roads to work efficiently, you can't have people going on scooters and walking in the roads and their heads buried in their phones, just crossing the street whenever you want. You have to have it work in an organized manner for these roads to be efficient. And so just today, I'm on Floating Feather, and I'm stuck behind a flatbed truck with the excavator, and he's going like 2 miles an hour. I'm like, what is the holdup? There's a guy on a bike in front of us just hogging the road. Like, you're just completely oblivious to what's going on. And there's a sign that says share the road. Well, what if we use the same logic and said, hey, share the sidewalk and put a silhouette of a truck. We're going to drive our trucks on the sidewalks. Or share the green belt and put a silhouette of our quads on there. We're going to drive our quads down. You know, it's like, come on, roads are made for cars, people. Be safe, and let's be organized. Let's make these roads efficient for everybody and safe. So that's all. I know it may be petty, but it's kind of venting a little bit on that.
And look, vent all you want here. John, I got to run, but thank you.
All right, man. Have a great day.
You too. Traffic and weather together. Kevin Miller in the morning, KIDO Talk Radio. Good morning, Dave. Sam in Caldwell. Good morning. You're on KIDO Talk Radio. Good morning, Sam.
Hey, good morning. So a couple of things. On these bicycle riders,
they're obnoxious. They're not oblivious. They're obnoxious. And anybody that says they have the same right to be on the road is out of their mind. I have to be licensed. I have to be insured. I have to have plates on my truck, stickers on my truck. They have to be renewed every year. And these guys riding these bikes seem to think they have the same right to use the road that I do. They're not insured. They're not licensed. They don't have plates, tags, nothing. I don't mind if they use the road, but they do not. When I'm driving my car, I have the right of way, and that's the way it should be. When I'm riding my bike, I don't have the right of way, and that's the way it should be. Now, if they want to get licenses and insurance and plates, and if they can maintain a minimum speed, then let them ride in the lane. Otherwise, get out of the way, you jackass, because they're just being ignorant. In a lot of cases, some cases not. But as far as these gun-free zones go, I can tell you what the liberal argument's going to be on that. If we just made guns illegal all the way across the nation and nobody had any of them, all of this would stop. So what they're going to demand is more power, more regulation, get rid of all the guns, and then we'll all be happy and safe. It's a false argument, but it is the camel's nose in the tent. So anyway, thanks. Bye.
All right, Sam, thank you for listening to KIDO Talk Radio. Of course, if Kamala Harris gets elected, the first order of business is a national emergency to take your guns. She's already bragged about it. Tea Party Bob from the Gem State Patriot, gemstatepatriot.com. Welcome to KIDO Talk Radio.
Well, good morning, Mr. Miller. You know, I have to express my concern about some of these drivers coming down the hill the other day. I had one California driver in back of me wanted to crawl up my butt, and one in front of me that wanted me to slam into his.
Wait a minute. So now, somebody wanted you to crawl into their butt? That's not this type of program.
No, they wanted to crawl up mine.
We're not that type of show.
I know, and that was just traffic. I mean, the traffic last night was horrible. I understand coming in from Salmon down at the cutoff on 21.
It was. Anyway, Mrs. Miller went to go see her dad in Donley and telling me about how bad the traffic was. I go, well, that's why I don't go anywhere. I stay here in the Treasure Valley. That is where my focus is. So you want to go up and smell the fish, get stuck in the traffic.
You know, I want to thank you for bringing out the problems with the liberalization of a higher education system like BSU. We just put an article up on this topic, and I've been talking about it for some time. As we as taxpayers spend millions of dollars each year supporting BSU and other state colleges that have been at the forefront of turning our students into liberal thinkers and supporters for the past 10 years. It's not too late to turn the tide, but it's going to take some forceful measures and some real tightening of budgets of these education institutions. I'm not sure that the rhinos in the legislature are even up to the task. I, for one, am tired of paying for liberal changes and higher salaries of professors who are influencing our kids and changing the state day by day. The Gem State's been trying to get records from BSU for years, so they can expose the way they pay their professors and hide much of the fluff.
Now, wait a minute. Wait a minute. You've been trying to get records from BSU. Have you filed the FOIA request, the First Amendment?
Yeah, we did get some records from them, but if you go through them, the problem is that they are so convoluted, you couldn't make heads or tails out of them if you spent 3 years going through them. I'm hoping somebody will finally do that. You know, when it comes to the state employees' leave time, one only has to know that the state of Idaho is the biggest employer in the state, and therefore the employees carry a lot of weight in any election for governor. This is a problem, and now Betsy Russell, who I don't particularly care for in many cases, has decided to bring these employees' costs to the taxpayer out of the closet. And maybe the taxpayers of Idaho will finally wake up and make the changes in the legislature in the next election that are necessary to fix the problem. You know, think about the fact that the swing vote in the last election was enough to get Governor Little elected.
Well,
in the three-way race,
right. Hold on. Right. Let me jump in here for a second. What do you make of the reaction this letter from 28 conservative lawmakers has gotten? You got the libs going crazy. You got the students having a protest with about 10 people showing up. And they're trying to frame this that it's diversity. No, we're talking about exclusionary practices that Boise State has been singled out by the Attorney General of the United States of America, and a 6% tuition increase. And now I usually don't ask a question. I have an opinion, and we go back and forth. I don't understand this whole going to the Mariners game and having the Alumni Association there throwing out the first pitch. I don't get that. It's not as if you need more people from Seattle coming to Boise State. I don't really get that, as opposed to a look at me moment. Your thoughts objectively on this whole outreach at the Mariners game by the new president?
I would say it's just one more way to try and push for a stadium. I think it's just one more way to bring this convoluted idea to home base. And then the more people you get that move in from Seattle, the bigger it's going to be here for the Liberals. It was a great move on her part. If you want to see more people moving in,
but here's my deal. I don't, that's like people that go post on Facebook, "Hey, look at me on vacation." That's great for them and their own edification, but for the rest of us here, it doesn't impact our lives. The baseball thing, you would need, God rest his soul, Mike Wallace to do an investigation on that one. The whole idea, though, of the marketing of Boise State in Seattle, they got Washington, they got Wazoo, they got Eastern Washington. It has nothing to do with the Boise State Broncos.
You don't have to market Boise State. Boise State is its own market.
And,
it's need marketing.
As I learned at your wedding from a few of your select guests that we won't reveal, you have people coming in from California every day buying up homes so their kids can rent them out eventually. That we've become the Airbnb for California. Idaho is now the Airbnb for California.
Well, that's something I wanted to get to because, I spent a little bit of time up here now. Places like the Treasure Valley are growing at the expense of rural Idaho, and this has to stop. We've taken all of the good natural resource jobs, eliminated them with the help of the Forest Service, and wants to watch the forest burn. Many of these towns don't even have the ability to attract new tech industry or businesses that rely on internet because they're stuck in a rut with old systems and bad companies servicing them with internet and phone service.
Well, let's be honest. There is no good internet company or good service in the state of Idaho. We won't name any, but there wherever you live, it's horrible.
There are a few spots. Places like Sandpoint and there's a place up in Idaho City now.
I'm talking about
I'm
talking about the civilized people down here.
No, there is no really good company. I understand Cable One's just been taken over. I know Frontier is going to be taken over in the fall by a company that is very hot on putting fiber optic in, and I think that may help. I think the people of Idaho are disgusted with the high taxes and congestion in the Treasure Valley. They're going to find new meccas to settle in with their families in these rural communities.
And here's the deal. The only people that have been talking about this problem for years is you and me. And we kept warning people about the congestion, the traffic, and all the elected officials, that's that little goofy show in the morning. Well, now, to quote Reverend Wright, the chickens have come home to roost.
Well, the chickens are the developers, and they have been taking all of the fees, all of the money with their urban renewal projects and all of these developments without paying the impact fees that go along with them. And you can thank the legislators and you can thank the local politicians for all of that. Yeah. And when your taxes go up another 25% next year, maybe the people of Idaho are going to wake up and revolt. And maybe that's what we really need to happen.
Well,
I got tired of it.
You've been calling for that for years, and then you left us. So,
well, now I got to fight from the hinterland.
There you have it. The mayor of New Meadows, Idaho, Tea Party Bob. Thank you.
Take care, my friend. Have a good day.
God bless. Always a privilege to hear from him. Max in Garden City with Kevin Miller on KIDO Talk Radio. Good morning, Max.
Good morning, Kevin Miller. Why do we even need a Department of Education on a state or federal level? Why do we need it? Can't the parents control through local school boards? And can't the local school boards be the end of the line as far as policy making? Why does the state, why do the feds have to put their thumb in our eye? Hello?
Well, there was one candidate in 1992 that said he was going to shut down the Department of Education, padlock it, fumigate it, and close it down for good. His name was Patrick Joseph Buchanan, and look what happened to him.
Well, the Department of Education has a lot of power. Even here on a local level, the teachers union has entirely too much punch. We need to look at eliminating. First thing you want to do, you want to eliminate them, and you want to cut all funding, government funding, to the Boise State sports programs. If they can't support themselves, then they go away.
Now, why would you do that?
Because college isn't for bringing in under-the-table bribes to the better players, for treating these kids like gods and pumping them up with a bachelor's degree that's worthless so that they might play NFL ball.
Isn't that a broad generalization?
Not really. When you hear about how much money they bring in, Boise State sports program, through licensing, through, you name all the myriad incomes for a sports team, yet with all that money they bring in, the state is still giving them money every year, and that is wrong. If they can't support themselves, cut them off at the knees. You do not need that. You're not here to teach kids to run and throw a ball. You're here to try and teach them something useful for their life.
Now, that's, people would say, a naive statement on your part.
And I would say, why don't you just fold up your Boise State flag,
wow,
take the sticker off the bumper of your car, and stop being some whiny little couch potato, living room quarterback? Oh man, he missed the line. I could have done that. Stop that. Get off the fanaticism. It's a sports program.
Look, you're not just talking about Boise State. You're talking about every college, any university in the country. You would, right here on this program, you're advocating getting rid of all collegiate sports unless they're self-sufficient.
No, I'm advocating letting them stand on their own 2 feet. I think sports programs are great.
You're a political guy, so how would you satisfy the Title IX requirements? Because with the exception of a couple basketball programs, women's sports do not make enough money, and very few men's football teams make money. I mean, the ones that are really profitable, that are self-sufficient, I'd say maybe 10.
I would say that sports, organized intramural sports, should be on a club level, as it is with many high schools.
You're not a fun person.
I'm not a fun person, but I'm also not throwing my taxpayer dollars into what is not a majority interest to the population.
Oh, you got 40,000 people that show up at the stadium that would disagree. Garth Brooks, same thing. Are you anti-Garth Brooks?
Garth Brooks is a whiny-ass little liberal.
Oh, my
I got
goodness.
no place for him.
Ooh.
He's a whiny liberal.
Ooh.
Sorry about the word. I didn't mean it to slip out, but he's one. Kevin, you are one of the few conservatives left on the air. Do not bend to these whiners.
Don't bend the knee.
Hey, don't do that. You bend the knee, I'll come down there personally and break the other one for you, buddy. Or bring Liberal Steve over. He can be my punching bag, and I can just work it out, get it out of my system.
Fair enough. God bless you, Max. Uncensored, unfiltered thought each and every morning. Kevin Miller, KIDO Talk Radio. Good morning, Debbie.
Hey, Kevin. I'm calling from outside the city limits of Ontario, and to tell you the truth, most of the time I just say I'm from Malheur County, Oregon. I think I like that connotation better. But I wanted to thank you for your comments this morning about the news reporting on the television regarding the opening of the marijuana dispensaries in Ontario. The impression that my brother and I got with the television, I won't name the station, in the evening news was excitement from the newscaster. And I have to say that Maggie O'Mara, because I know that you're associated, you use their weather, and Maggie's on your station occasionally, that she gave it with a level voice, a straight face. She reported it as news, not with enthusiasm. At the end of her report, she reminded people that marijuana is illegal in the state of Idaho, which actually it's still illegal, period. But anyway, I just wanted to tell you thanks, and I want to tell you thanks for keeping up on what's happening in Oregon and especially here.
Thank you, Debbie.